You know, I kind of feel like talking about the Metroid series. But, which one should I start with? I'm a big fan of the Metroid franchise. I have been for a few years now, but it's one of those franchises I had a really hard time getting into. And I really had to find the game, actively seek out the game that suited my needs, until I eventually warmed up to all the others as well. The first one I ever tried out was Metroid Prime 3, and while I did like it, I ended up renting it at the same time as Twilight Princess, and as you can imagine, Zelda, no pun intended, was my prime focus at the time. Later, somebody lent me their copy of Metroid Prime 1, but it was scratched and it only worked when it wanted to, and I didn't feel like working around the quirks just to play it at the time. You wanna know what game actually got me more into the Metroid series? Now don't get me wrong, Other M certainly does have its fair share of flaws, but I liked it for its fast-paced gameplay. Its story, however, not so much. But before you click off the video in disgust, that's not the game that made me a die-hard fan. The game that made me a die-hard fan was... And that game, unlike Other M, is almost complete perfection in nearly every way. And anyone who disagrees, well, what the fuck is wrong with you? It's your opinion, but what the fuck is wrong with you? I ended up getting Metroid Other M for $5. And at the same time as I got that game, I also got a $20 Wii Points card when those were a thing. And one of the games I got with it was Metroid on the NES. Decided to give the Metroid series a fair shot, so I got two at the same time. And the game out of those two that I enjoyed the least will definitely surprise you. The one I enjoyed the least between Metroid Other M and Metroid 1 was... Please don't hate me. Let me explain. Now I'm well aware that this game is old and that any flaws it has are merely due to technical limitations. And if it wasn't for this game, the later masterpieces, and even games like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, wouldn't exist. So, in that regard, I hold nothing but high respect. But holy Tifa's big-ass titties in a bikini at the beach has this game fucking aged. Now, I don't hate this game. Not at all. At one point I kinda did, but, it's grown on me. But there's still a few things about it that bother me. A lot. For one, the game is cryptic as all shit. Of course, cryptic games weren't uncommon back in the day, but this is one of those ones that really tests your smarts, curiosity, and most of all, patience. But nowadays, gamers, and I use that term very loosely, are spoiled by games that hold your hand so fucking much you wonder if the developers are in love with you. So, nobody wants to play games like that anymore. I beat this game using a map I found on the internet, and I don't even feel slightly bad about it. Better than using the God Mode password, which I did the first time I beat this game. What can I say? I was lazy. Speaking of which, have you seen the password system in this game? 24 letters. Jesus, you think that's enough? But if you think that's all, we're not even done yet. There's at least 2 parts where you can get stuck, literally forcing you to either reset or die. Bravo! Top-notch game design. Top-notch. Not to mention, the game starts you off with 30 units of health every time you die, forcing you to farm health back from enemies. Fucking hell! And this is considered one of the best NES games? Though I suppose there is a reason for that. It was pretty revolutionary for its time. There weren't too many games like it. And it kickstarted an amazing franchise, so I definitely appreciate it for that. The game certainly had good ideas, but this game has not aged very well at all. If only there was another version of this game that had all the improvements made in future installments and removed all the problems that this game had. Well, what do you know? There is. Get those Game Boy Advances ready, folks. Now this is a textbook example of a remake done right. Gone was the primitive password system. Gone was the overly cryptic nature. And when you died, you always came back with full health, energy tanks and all. And, get this, pressing start brings up your in-game map. So, you actually have the smallest clue where the fuck to go now. What a novel concept! Now, if there's one thing I always loved about the original Metroid, besides the lonely atmosphere and the feeling you get when you finally deliver the final blow to Mother Brain, it's the music. And this game has some incredible remixes that really push the GBA sound chip to its limit and create somewhat of a Metroid Prime-esque atmosphere. I was never really a fan of the GBA sound chip. Some of the music sounds a little too high-pitched for my liking. But this game, along with Aria of Sorrow, has some of the best music I've ever heard in any game. Though this game is a bit more linear compared to the original, so that might be a turnoff for some. One more really cool thing about the original game was how open-ended it was. Like the first Zelda game, where you went in the game was almost entirely up to you. You could take on the first 2 areas and bosses in any order you wanted to, and you could even collect most of the items and power-ups before ever touching a boss at all. This game, however, takes a more streamlined approach, so you have to conquer the areas and bosses in the intended order. On the bright side, though, there's way more bosses, so this game's a lot lengthier as a result. And the bosses that were in the original game now take on their Super Metroid forms, meaning they're way bigger than they were before. Who knew this would turn into this? Now, I know I bitched a little bit, but the first Metroid game is far from a bad game, unlike what a few people might think. Though it is aged very poorly, and my opinion on this game has changed a few times. When I first started playing it, I liked it a little bit, but then I noticed a few flaws that kind of turned me away. But then I decided to give it another chance, and it kind of grew on me. It definitely had a lot going for it, and it kickstarted an amazing series. I would definitely recommend Zero Mission over the original any day of the week, But all in all, both games are pretty good. Metroid is an amazing franchise, and I would recommend just about any of the games to anyone, except maybe Other M. But, with that, I will see you folks later.